Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra, Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I24 News.
We are here in Kibbutz Kfar Aza, one of the small Israeli communities that were devastated on October 7th when some 70 Hamas terrorists came from Gaza, broke through the gate of the kibbutz, and began a rampage of destruction, killing, mutilating, destroying homes such as this. This was the home of Yaniv Ohana, a drummer by profession. He was there with his wife, their two young children, ages 9 and 12, when the attack began. Initially, they thought it was a rocket attack. Yula, Yaniv's wife, went with the two children in the safe house of their home, while he went to the armory to get a weapon to fight back against the terrorists. But while he was doing that, the terrorists broke into the home. Yula and the two children hid on the bed box underneath their bed in their safe room. But the room was not safe. The terrorists broke into the room while they were hiding there under the bed. Yula says she remembers the terrorists sitting on top of her talking. Soon they left, but they set the house aflame. Yula and the two children were stuck in the bed box, and Yula had to use force to open up the door of it, get the two children out. They came into the backyard, and they hid in these bushes until the terrorists went to the front of the house. And when they got the chance, they ran to the warehouse on the kibbutz to hide for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, Yaniv came back to this area, armed with a weapon, confronted the terrorists, opened fire, killed some 8 or 9 of them after he hit one with an explosive belt, but at a price. He was shot in his hand, was injured, but he managed to pull through the day and reunite with his wife and 2 children. One of the lucky ones, although he was hospitalized with a hand injury, a drummer, but just last week he appeared in a live performance, drumming with one hand, a benefit performance for other survivors of October 7th. With us, we have another resident of Kibbutz Kfar Aza, Ido Fellis. Ido, we heard one story of the Ohana family. What's your story of that day?
Imagine yourself, you're going to sleep at your house on normal night, and then you wake up for another terrorist attack of rockets. You know, it's actually it's not normal, but we get used to it through the years in this area of Israel. So we got inside the safe house in our home. I was with my younger sister, my mother, and my father, and we went inside, and then underneath a lot of rockets. I can't even say how much, because it was like every second another rocket, another rocket, another rocket. A few hours later, we started to realize that this thing is not only rockets. It's a lot bigger than we thought. It's a terror attack on the kibbutz, on the people of the kibbutz, on innocent civilians without nothing to protect them, civilians that most of them are in the safe house in that moment. I don't know how much terrorists came inside the kibbutz, but a lot with fire in their eyes. You know, they came to kill.
Right, and they killed, and there was a heavy price. Some 63 residents of the kibbutz were killed that day. Some 17 taken hostage to Gaza. Yeah. I believe 10 have now come back, but there are still at least 7 members, I believe, of the kibbutz who are still being held, including some of them, of course, personally. Tell us, for example, about the twins who are still being held from Kfar Aza there in Gaza.
Yeah, the twins, Gali and Ziv Berman, 26 years old, child. You know, they are children of their mother, people with a smile on the face all the time. My dear friends, they were like my brothers. You know, I sleep with them, I walk with them, I have fun with them. We do all together. We even flew to South America after the army. We did everything together, and they're not fighters. They're not nothing. something. The peaceful people, you know, they just want
Right.
to do good in this world. And
God will.
the only bad thing they did in this 7 October is to sleep in their home.
Right. God willing, they will come back with the rest of the hostages
We hope.
and all the residents of Kibbutz Kfar Aza. We're hearing the booms now of the battle in Gaza. Will this kibbutz rise again? Will Kfar Aza rise again?
Kfar Aza will rise again. Kfar Aza will rise again better and beautiful and bigger and more powerful than ever. And this is the message we want to send all over the world, that we come here to restore our life and to bring this community to the best. To the best and to the top of the community in the world. We want to be stronger than we ever be.
All right, that is the spirit of Kfar Aza. Fellas, thank you for joining us on this special 2-month anniversary of Israel's war against Hamas here in Kfar Aza. Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Khaled Ben David. It is 2 months now since the start of Israel's war against Hamas. We've moved from Kibbutz Kfar Aza to the city of Ofakim, which is some 25 kilometers east of the Gaza border. On the morning of October 7th, 2 trucks carrying 14 terrorists, Hamas terrorists, entered the city. It was the deepest that the Hamas terrorists were able to penetrate into Israel on that morning. And a fierce battle ensued here in the city of Ofakim, a battle in which some 50 residents were killed, as many residents who had died, who have been killed here in this city, in this town, over the past 7 decades since it was founded. The reason more were not killed was because of the actions largely of both the police officers in this city and civilians who joined in the fight. Joining us now in this special broadcast from Ofakim, we have our senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev. We have Colonel Olivia Rafowitz of the Israel Defense Forces spokesperson's office. And we have a special guest, Sergeant Major Yehonatan Sroor, who took part in that battle on October 7th, the Battle of Ofakim. Yehonatan, tell us about, let's start at the beginning. Take us back to October 7th and how you experienced that day.
First of all, I wake up at 6:30, like most of the people in the southern district of Israel, to the sound of sirens. Immediately, I understand that something is wrong, because where I live, usually there's not a rocket there, no rocket attacks. A few minutes later, we receiving messages in our phone about terrorists inside Israel. And our commanding officer told us to gear up and to come to our unit to take a weapon and ammunition and everything we could, and to come here to Ofakim. When we arrived here, on the way here, we heard on the radio a lot of police officers that engaging with terrorists, a lot of police officers that requesting support and ammunition, and they need help. And you don't know where to go, because you have a lot of friends that you hear on the radio that dying, and you don't know when you can't go everywhere. When we arrived to Ofakim, we heard about 2 homes that terrorists barricaded there. We went to the first home, and we saw a lot of police officers already engaging with the terrorists. A few minutes later, we went to another home, and we fought there like 2 hours, something like that. 3 terrorists inside the home. The family also in that home. A few hours later, after we cleared that home, we went to the police station here in Ofakim, and we opened the emergency morgue. A lot of dead bodies from all over the area started to flow into the police station, and we needed to take them from the cars, from the trucks, and to place them and count the dead. And after that, me and my fellow officers from my unit drove to Magen. In Magen, we arrested a few terrorists that that give up because they know they can't do anything right now. And then we stayed here in Ofakim to like 24 hours. 26.
I want to know a bit of what you were thinking and feeling that day. When did it dawn on you that this was not just another terrorist infiltration of just a few terrorists, that you were really dealing with a massive attack?
Yes, in the beginning we only saw a few videos from Ofakim and Sderot, but only when I turned on the radio and I heard a lot of officers from all over this place, from all over the region, asking for help, I understood that there is a lot, something bigger. When I was in the army, we always prepared for something big. Not like that, but we know there will be terror attack in a few locations, but not something like that. But when I heard all the location and all the officers that requesting backup, I understand there's something big. And we're dealing with a massive attack.
Those of us who were watching in our homes and looking at the events unfolding live on television, which they did, had one question: where was the army? Where were the real combat forces? Did you have time to think about that during the course? Did you wonder yourself that? Or were you too busy having just to deal with the reality of trying to bring the situation under control?
We didn't think about the army. We think about our mission, our job. Every day we waking up to fight bad guys. That morning we wake up to fight monsters, but we need to do it because this is our mission. This is our job. We need to protect the people here, the citizens, our family also. And when you fight alongside your friends, you don't think about other stuff. You think about to helping them, to help yourself, and to kill the enemy.
All right. Olivia, I want to ask you, we're now 2 months into the war. It's the achievements of the IDF during this time are undeniable. Impressive achievements, impressive blows against Hamas. We saw the release of many of the hostages last week. Yeah. But 138 hostages still being held in Gaza. We have, I believe, 88 now combat deaths in the Gaza Strip. The leadership, Yehi Sinwar, Mohammed Def, are still at large, and Hamas still controlling much of the southern half. So where are we in this war 2 months in?
Good evening. We are in a war, and when you ask where we are, I'm telling you that from the 7th of October, we're in a war imposed on us by Hamas. It's a very serious war. We need time to complete the mission. The mission is not simple, but is compulsory to achieve. We need to eliminate, to eradicate Hamas military capabilities in the Gaza Strip. We need to eliminate the leaders of Hamas, and you know that there is a huge framework, huge system of underground tunnels with ammunition, with weapons, with people under beneath the land. We talk about maybe 30 to 40,000 operatives of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and the army is actually doing an outstanding job for now, after the failure of the 7th of October.
The failure that we just discussed, the clear failure.
But about where we are, I think that Hamas knows very well where we are. But now we cannot give too many details because we are still in a fighting situation. Right now, there are fierce combats in the area of Sajaya, of Jabalia, in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Also, we are around Khan Yunis in the south, and also within the city with special forces fighting now, even face-to-face, terrorists in the area. So altogether, we are achieving tremendous targets and achievements, but we need time, and time is a key issue right now to talk about.
Well, let's talk a little about that, because we know there's diplomatic pressure on Israel from its key ally, the United States, to try to bring at least the combat stage of this war to a conclusion, to try to minimize civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip. A big question is being asked whether the IDF is going to get the time it needs, and is it taking that into account in the pace of its operations in Gaza, which well, weighed against other factors such as the casualties of the IDF.
In this situation, things are done only when they are done. We don't talk about what will be tomorrow and after tomorrow. But concerning the issue of humanitarian issues, which is a very important issue, I would like to emphasize that I think we are maybe the only army in the world right now running this operation like we are running it on a military point of view, but also running this operation with a big, I would say, big emphasis on the humanitarian issue. For example, we are really trying to do a lot of efforts in order to push the population from combat areas toward humanitarian areas, mostly in Moassi area on the west part of Khan Younis in the south. We gave a lot of resources in order to do it. We also allowed, in spite of the fact that the pause is over, we are allowed still hundreds of trucks from Egypt through Rafah crossing point to pass on to provide humanitarian assistance in many fields. And for us, it's a very important issue, even if we know that many NGOs or the Hamas are trying actually to criticize in all means what the IDF is doing in order to prevent civilians to be involved in combat situation.
All right. We're talking, of course, we're here in the south, Jonathan, so we're focusing on the main front, the Gaza front, but there are other fronts in this war. There is the northern front, Hezbollah, today, a civilian being killed by fire from across the Lebanese border. We've had several casualties, both civilians and officers, some senior officers from the IDF. There's a front that Israel has never experienced before, with the shooting of missiles, rockets, ballistic missiles from Yemen by the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. We've seen increased terrorist activity and IDF responses in the West Bank. You've covered a lot of the military activity over the past years here in Israel. Let's look at how the IDF is dealing with this challenge. This is the multi-front war in many ways that we had been talking about for years now.
It is. It is the multi-front war, but there's one front which is, of course, the big one, the one where most of the efforts are concentrated, and that is Gaza. All other fronts are active, but to a certain level, especially Hezbollah, which has always been and still is the most worrisome front, and there is constant back and forth fire, but to a certain extent, both sides, if we look at it, almost completely, not entirely, but almost completely, keep it almost on the border fence, and not beyond that. If Hezbollah would have wanted to join full on, it had many chances to do it. First, there was October 7th, when Israel was literally caught by surprise. What better time to join the fight? But they did not do it on October 7th. Did Hezbollah know or not know that the October 7th attack was planned? Not exactly sure. Many factors are saying that Hezbollah was not aware. This attack was kept in complete secrecy, and Hezbollah was not aware. That is why perhaps they did not join. Then there were a couple of statements by Hezbollah officials saying, if Israel invades with ground forces, then we will join full on. That did not happen either. Then they said, now there's a ceasefire. When the ceasefire ends, and if Israel expands its ground operation, then we will join. They did not do that either. Does that mean that we can be certain, can we know for sure that Hezbollah will not join further on? No, we cannot know. We can never really know what is going to happen. The assumption is that the main focus will remain here. The other arenas are active, but will remain active as they are. Does that mean that Iran is already aware that they're losing one proxy, losing one front of its multi-front, perhaps because Hamas will eventually collapse, and that means that along this multi-front war that Iran was planning for years, one front will eventually be lost.
All right, Yehonatan, we've talked about different fronts in this war. There is another front, the home front. It has to be said, Israelis, certainly here in the what we call the Gaza envelope area, certainly those who are living in the northern border, yes, in other parts as well. Rockets have been falling in Tel Aviv, a sense of uncertainty in many other communities, that sense of personal security that many Israelis had prior to October 7th has been shattered in some degree. How do you feel as a policeman, who the branch of the Israeli force is really responsible for that personal sense of security, feel about going forward and whether that can be restored?
I think now, more than ever, the Israeli citizens trust in the police more than ever, because they saw that police officers and the police force as a whole stood up against the most powerful attack Israel experienced in the few decades. And we saved, I think, thousands of lives that day. Every single officer saved hundreds and thousands of people because the spirit of the officers, the bravery, the mindset that my mission is to protect life and at any cost, even if I lose my life. And we see it every day when I walk in the street. People tell me hello and keep yourself safe, and we love the police and something like that. And now more than ever, I think the people is counting on the police, and they saw that the police officers are brave as soldiers, as every other branch of security force in Israel.
You know, earlier today I was in Kibbutz Kfar Aza, which, like most of those communities that are right on or in the immediate area of the Gaza border, have been completely evacuated, homes devastated, questions being asked about whether where is that community going to go from here. Ofakim is different, of course. As I said before, though, 50 lives were lost here, equivalent to all those that were lost in the 70 years since the town was founded. What is the specific mood in Ofakim, you feel, among the population here going forward? We should mention, of course, the continuous rocket attacks and rocket alerts that this town has experienced since October 7th.
I think the Israelis understood that only together we can win everything. Only when we don't fight between ourselves, left wing, right wing, it doesn't matter. I don't care about it. I protect everyone, and every officer protect everyone. I will not matter what his political opinion, not matter what you think about. Even people that hate the police, we protect that day. And I think Israel as a whole need to stay strong, needs to stay united, and everything will be fixed. Maybe in a few years, maybe 10 years, I don't know. I don't care because it's not my job. But only together, only as one group, as one nation, we will win everything that will come against us.
Olivia, that unity, that feeling, that sense of unity and morale and support of the IDF is certainly there. But one issue is burning at the heart of Israelis, and the issue of the hostages. And how much of a factor we've heard, and I'm not going to rehash all of the discussions that have been had and concerns raised, but the question people are asking is how will those hostages be returned, and how much the Army is taking into account their safety as it carries on this very dangerous mission in Gaza.
I want to be very clear. For the Army of Israel, for the Governor of Israel, for the Chief of General Staff, and for the officers and soldiers in the IDF, the return of the hostages alive is a priority. Now, it's a priority from the very beginning. And for all of us, we see these hostages in the Gaza Strip as the first mission to achieve. Now, it does not mean that because of that we're not going to continue to fight and to destroy Hamas. Hamas infrastructures and to kill Hamas leaders in the Gaza Strip. It is very important to make it clear. It is because the army, the IDF, is very strong. It is because the army is doing what they are doing against Hamas in Jabalia, in Sajaya, right now in Khan Yunis. It is because we are doing there, and because all the soldiers, thousands of them, are now fighting right now in fierce combats all over the Gaza Strip. It is why Hamas, at some time, will be obliged, like it was the case before, to find a way to make the hostages back alive to Israel. Because without the military pressure, they will not accept in any sense the possibility of pause to make the hostages back home. And we make it as a priority because we have in mind, all of us, in Israel, in the army, in the Shabak, in the police, we have in mind the 10 months old Kfir and his brother Ariel, and all of them, 17 women and children are still there. And for Israel, hostages will be back home alive. It is, I think, we swear that it will be the case for the people of Israel and for the Jewish people looking at it, because like Kfir has become a symbol.
The now 10-month-old baby whose fate is uncertain, and that is, Jonathan, that is what's tearing at the heart of Israelis, the uncertainty about the fate of those hostages now.
That is correct, and not only that, we've already heard testimonies from more than 100 hostages who did come back, and we know that the situation is very difficult. It is a very difficult situation. There's not enough food. They're being moved from place to place. They might be tortured. It's a difficult situation, and many of the hostages are old, are ill, are injured, and we don't know. We don't even know their exact number. We're speaking of 138, but there might be more. It's a very difficult situation.
All right, I want to ask Jonathan Regev and Colonel Rafwitz to stay with us as we go out for a break. I do want to thank Sergeant Major Yehonatan Swar for joining us, and mainly to thank you for the heroism that you and your fellow officers displayed here in Ofakim on that morning of October 7th.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us on I-24 News. Welcome back to this special broadcast on I-24 News, marking 2 months since the start of Israel's war against Hamas. We are here in the southern town of Ofakim, about 25 kilometers east of the border of the Gaza Strip. As we mentioned earlier, on October 7th, some 2 trucks carrying Hamas terrorists entered the city, began shooting and killing indiscriminately, killing some 50 people during the course of the day. That's a number equivalent to all of the people who have been killed in Ofakim since this town's founding back in 1955. The only reason that more weren't killed here during that incursion was the heroic action of mainly the police officers who came here to this town and were stationed here, and even civilians who joined the fight. Still with us, we have our senior defense correspondent, Jonathan Regev. We have Colonel Olivia Rafowitz of the IDF spokesperson's office. And we have joining us Kochi Abu Aron. She is a native daughter of the town of Ofakim, born and raised here. She is also the sister of Sergeant Major Roni Abu Haron, one of those officers who fought heroically to save this city from Hamas terrorists, and unfortunately paid with his life in doing so. Kochi, first of all, tell us about what you experienced on that morning of October 7th, and what you know about what your brother's actions on that fateful day.
On October 7, we woke up to tremendous sounds of sirens. I took all the kids, my son and my nephews and nieces, and we went down to the shelter, to our home shelter. And I called my sister-in-law, Roni's wife, Shiran, and I told her everything is okay, the kids are fine, we made it to the shelter and they are relaxed, don't worry. And then she told me there were terrorists coming to Ofakim, and Roni went out, just dressed, took his pistol and went out. We started to call Roni, me and my other sister and brothers. We tried to reach to him, and also my mom. When he didn't answer, I called my brother, the officer. He's an officer in the police, and I told him, please check what is happening with Roni. Rafi came from Beersheba, drove from Beersheba to Ofakim, knowing that Roni is safe in one of the houses. He said, if I'm already here, I will join the fighting. You need to understand that until they arrived to the Tamar Street, where civilians and policemen started to fight them, there was a slaughter that started at the Goren Street from the road. They shot people, elderly people, people that were running for shelters. They shot everybody. And what Roni did, what we now know that Roni did, is told people to go inside the houses instead of those outside safe rooms, what we called miguniot, and he told them go inside the houses, close the door. He also told Rachel, the famous Rachel with the cookies, and
the one
her
who entertained Hamas terrorists with cookies and kept them, in a sense, occupied until police could come in and rescue her and her family.
Yeah, and he told her and David, her husband, to go inside. And unfortunately, terrorists that came from the roundabout here shot at him, and he was killed in front of her house. The person that discovered this idea was my brother. He saw him, my elder brother. He saw Roni lying on the street, and he was the one who came and told us that Roni was gone and he died. And we didn't believe, and we said to him, Rafi, are you sure? And he said, I'm covered with his blood. Yeah, and it was really the blackest Shabbat ever, not just for the state, but also for us.
For sure. Let me ask you about what you were experiencing yourself, on your feelings on that day, even beyond your brother's death. We had an officer here who took part in it. I asked him, were you wondering, where was the army when it was happening? How big is this happening? And he said that in the midst of the action, he couldn't give thought, he couldn't entertain those thoughts. What about yourself? Were you thinking what's happening here? Why is this so beyond our imagination? Where are the forces?
We are living in Ofakim, which is very close to a lot of army bases and also Air Force bases. And we were shocked to see that none of the plane flew over our head. Usually, when there are stuff happening in the north, we immediately hearing the planes over in the sky of Ofakim, and suddenly there was silence. The only people that went outside were the policemen of Ofakim. That most of them didn't work in Ofakim station.
Right.
Some of them worked, like my brother. He was a detective in Raat station. In Raat station, lost 4 of its policemen.
Right,
and
that's
also,
the Bedouin town, also down south.
And also the policemen, the police lost 59 policemen during that day. The police was the thin blue line that actually saved the Negev.
Right.
I don't want to say that the army was not there, because I know that people were fighting in Be'eri and in Reim.
And lost their lives.
Yeah, and lost also their life. But here in Ofakim, we didn't see the army yet.
Okay. And so let me just ask you, as I said, you were born and raised in this town, a fairly short distance from Gaza. Over the years, you've had experienced the continual rocket attacks. How has that experience left you as a person, as an Israeli, as a resident, especially of this city of Ofakim?
Usually until October 7, we used to go outside and see like the missiles and the Iron Dome together. And since that day, when we hear sirens, we are closing windows, we are closing the doors, the main gate. Usually in our home, the front gate was open for the people that live in front of us, that they don't have any shelter, to come and enter our home. Since October 7, we are not opening the front gate anymore for anybody. The front gate is now closed, and we are scared from what will come after the missiles. We are not scared from the missiles. We are scared from what will happen after the missiles.
Right. Well, that is the challenge. Olivier, bring that sense of security back. I want to talk about, earlier I spoke with Jonathan about some of the other fronts that Israel is dealing with in this war. The northern front, where tens of thousands of residents have had to leave their homes and relocate to other locations because of the Hezbollah rockets. Now, people in the city of Eilat, that used to be a city where people during times of conflict in Israel would seek refuge. In fact, many of the residents of the Gaza envelope area are being housed in hotels in Eilat that are now coming under fire from as far away as Yemen. Is the IDF, does it have the resources to deal with what we said before is now maybe its first multi-front war in decades?
Let's be cautious when we define the situation. There is a war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. There is a combat situation in the north. We send very clear messages to Hezbollah and to Lebanon through different actors in order to keep this border not to all-out war. In the case that Hezbollah will decide to go to all-out war, then, like just said today, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Beirut could be like Khan Yunis or Gaza like today. So they will take a big risk to go forward. Concerning the situation in the south, if you mention now the Houthi rebels from Yemen using ballistic missile
supplied by Iran, we should say.
That's the point. I mean, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthi are connected to the same support, which is Iran. And Iran right now is indirectly involved in this situation by using Hamas in the south, Hezbollah in the north, and the Houthi in Yemen to fight against Israel, but in a situation where they want to go in this war, but without being directly involved in this war. So let's be right now cautious. Like just said Jonathan, the priority for Israel is to fight and to win the war against Hamas in the south. just mentioned by Kochi, what happened here is for us a must in order to destroy the root of the massacre, which is Hamas. Hamas will pay. Hamas will be destroyed at the end of this operation. It will take the time that it will need it to be, but at the end of the day, Hamas will be destroyed. Concerning the north and concerning other areas, I think that the world right now is watching the IDF stronger than ever. And what happened the 7th of October was a failure. And we will discuss about this failure after the war. But right now, the world and the region, are watching the IDF standing up very strong. Behind them, the people of Israel, one nation, together. The soldiers are from all over, from the south, from the north, from Kiryat Shmona, from Eilat, fighting against Hamas. And I think that maybe the strongest message tonight on this first candle of Hanukkah is we are together, strong than ever, to fight against Hamas. We just today showed to the world tens of detainees, new detainees, Hamas arrested. Some of them surrendered to the IDF forces in the Gaza Strip.
Is Hamas losing control of that part of the Gaza Strip, I guess the southern half? This is a big question being asked now. We've seen footage, scenes of relief trucks being mob scenes of people grabbing the humanitarian aid off those trucks, scenes of people speaking out openly against Hamas. Is that the assessment of the IDF?
I think it's better not to give any assessment until the end of the mission, what it achieved. Right now we are in the middle of the fight. We are losing soldiers. We are moving on. Hamas is maybe moving in different directions. We have also to be very, very careful concerning the civilian population. We are not fighting Gaza people. We are fighting Hamas. So let's wait. Let's be patient. We need time. At the end of the day, the IDF will achieve the mission. For all the people who suffered slaughters, murders, and dead friends, people, brothers, we will destroy Hamas, and then we will discuss what happened on the 7th of October, because we need to also discuss, but when the war is over.
Right. Jonathan, as Olivia said, Israel, the IDF losing men in Gaza. Two more today, I believe, were announced. One we should take note of, the son of Gadi Eisenkot, the former chief of staff of the IDF, himself a member of the war cabinet, part of that elite group that is making decisions about how this war is being fought. Losing his son there on the battlefield in Gaza, and maybe highlighting the sacrifice. Again, as Olivier said, Israelis coming from all walks of life here. No one is spared the pain and the sacrifice, even the people at the very top making these decisions. But that's going to be, as the battle goes on and it goes into difficult areas, especially maybe a showdown with the Hamas core in Khan Yunis, a difficult and painful sacrifice for Israelis to make.
You know who is spared from sacrifices? The children of Hamas leaders, because there was another thing which was published today, and that is the fact that the son of Ismail Haniya, he bought jewelry just the past year. He bought jewelry which is worth the salary of 2 years, the average salary of a Gazan man for 2 years. He spent that this year alone on jewelry, just on jewelry. That is the son of the leader of Hamas. On the other hand, this is our side, the Israeli side, the son of a former chief of staff, the son of a prominent member of the cabinet, of the war cabinet, is a combat soldier, a reserve combat soldier, a volunteer combat soldier. There were so many opportunities for this man not to be a combat soldier, not to volunteer, not to be in reserves, because he has the connections in the high places, right? But in Israel, for most times, that doesn't happen. Everybody goes on to fight, even the son of the chief of staff. What a difference between what is happening on our side and on their side.
Olivia, you want?
Yeah, if I may, I would like to salute all the soldiers tonight in the Gaza Strip, around the northern border. We must salute them because they are doing something that, for all of us, is a must to protect and to defend the state of Israel. So really, we can only say Toda Rabba. Thank you to all of them,
Sure.
because we are here, because they are there.
All right. Kochi, this war is being fought on many fronts, as we discussed. There is another front as well, international public opinion, international media that has in many ways not been sympathetic to Israel in the past, that has in many ways presented a distorted picture. I want to ask you, as one of those Israelis who for years has suffered under the rocket attacks from Hamas, that have seen what happened on October 7th and paid a painful price for it. When you perhaps, and you are an English speaker, obviously, see how some of those abroad have been presenting perhaps a distorted picture, a biased picture of Israel's struggle against Hamas. From my side, I had an interview on the Time and the New York Times. The New York Times? Yes, we had an interview. A reporter came here, and he was shocked from what happened. He traveled with me in the Tamar Street and in the Goren Street, and he met with the people around. And I'm telling to those people, come, hear the local. Don't listen to any official members of the government. Don't listen to your reporters. Come and meet the citizens. Come to see what we are suffering on a daily basis, what happened to us on October 7th. I think it's the best thing for a person to know from one person to another person without any negotiation and without nice words, just to hear how much people are suffered during October 7th. People didn't go out of their houses for 2 days because they were so afraid that terrorists are still traveling and moving in Ofakim. We heard, and kids here are in regression. They are wetting in beds and they are having problems. They have dreams. I have one nephew and two nieces that are the kids of my brother Ronnie, and they are devastated. Their mental health is not the same, and it will never be the same, because they hear missiles. They know that their father died. For us, lucky for us, they were not at home, but all the kids in this neighborhood heard RPG, heard gunshots, people screaming, dying. Some of them saw bodies outside, while those are sites of civilians. This is not a sites of army. Those are not soldiers. They were simply civilians. So if they want to hear the truth, come. I will host anyone that will want to come and hear what happened to us on October 7th. I will host anyone. Well, I hope that offer is taken up. I want to get your views on this as a veteran journalist and a member of the IDF spokesperson's office, because this is not just an issue of public relations or public diplomacy. Israel is going to have to get the support it needs from certainly some members of the international community, certainly from the United States and its key allies in Europe, to get the latitude, to get the time it needs to carry out its mission of destroying Hamas, bringing a new order for the civilians of Hamas, and most of all, of course, freeing the hostages, bringing them back home, and bringing them home in a timely manner, because we know from the reports what's been happening. And I want to say, Olivier, that's part of your challenge in the IDF spokesperson's office, to try to get an accurate picture of really what the situation is, what it's been, but certainly what it is now on the ground here, especially in the Gaza theater.
I think that there is a war within the war. There is a war against Hamas. There is also a war to explain, to legitimate what we are doing now against Hamas. And it is true that sometimes we are surprised to see people, they don't understand what we are doing. And I think that this war, which is our war, and we need to wage this war and to win this war, because what happened to us on the 7th of October is a war that sometimes we need to explain to our friends, to our allies, that between you and me, people in Paris, in London, in Stockholm, in the States, all over the world, maybe don't express it, but I think that they understand that a whole nation, State of Israel, people here, all over, fight for their survival, for their fight to be here in this part of the globe, here in Israel as a Jewish state. Because what happened the 7th of October was a willingness for people to destroy the Jewish state. They wanted to destroy the Jewish people in Ofakim, in Nir Oz, in Nachal Oz, all over. And we know it. Because we know it, we are now fighting back. And if people don't like us, it's not a problem. Because we need to be strong, and right now it is our war, our time to fight, and we have no other alternative to bring back the hostages alive and to fight and to win. We explain, but if they don't understand, we'll continue to fight.
I understand that, but it is a problem of sorts, Jonathan, because as I said before, Israel is going to need some support. It has been the United States, the Biden administration has been generous, both in supplying arms to Israel, in helping defend it, even outright in dealing, for example, with the missiles being shot by Yemen by the Houthi rebels, by bringing the Sixth Fleet off the coast of Lebanon in order to keep Hezbollah restrained. But it is a challenge in the context of course, there are civilian suffering. We don't know reliable figures. Hamas has said some 16,000. And the challenge of journalists to try to put that figure in the context of where the responsibility for those civilian casualties really lies in the Gaza Strip, and what really has to be done to both save Israeli civilians, but also, in a sense, those civilians in Gaza.
It is very challenging because, global leaders and some friendly leaders, like President Macron of France, for example, the man is very friendly for the Israeli cause. I don't think anyone can doubt that. And he said loud and clear, we are concerned by the amount of civilian casualties in Gaza. I completely agree with the man. It is very, very concerning that there are so many civilian casualties. The question is, why does this happen? And explaining to the world why the reason that it is happening is not because Israel has any will whatsoever of killing civilians in Gaza, but because Hamas is using them as human shields. We're seeing the IDF spokesperson is bringing out every day videos of huge ammunition depots in schools, in mosques, in hospitals. The Shifa hospital, we saw that tunnel underneath. What was that tunnel for? Is it a water dam? The answer is, of course, no. And explaining that to the world when there are so many factors, like networks, like politicians who are ignoring that. They're saying there's civilian suffering in Gaza, and that's it. There's that word that everybody likes to use today, context, right? The UN General, the Secretary General, and those of the American universities, the heads of the American universities. There's a context and there's a reason for the human suffering in Gaza. It is not because of the Israeli will. Israel has no will whatsoever in doing it. It's because Hamas is using them as human shields. Explaining that to the world is a very challenging issue.
Right. I want to ask you a lot of talk about the day after in Gaza, and that's uncertain. Nobody knows, what will happen in Gaza when Hamas is toppled, and of course, all the hostages are free. But let me ask you about your vision of the day after here in Ofakim. Gaza will still be there. There will still be the millions of Palestinians there. The Negev itself is a challenging area for Israel. What do you think what is your hopes for the day after here in Ofakim that you think that the residents are going to need?
As a child, I went to Gaza. They had the most amazing peaches. They were so tasty. We were traveling back and forth to Gaza. And unfortunately, instead of things getting better, they got worse. Listening to fundamental religious ideas and changing their way of treating Israel and thinking about us in a different way, because we had a lot of people coming in the past working here in the municipality from Gaza, from Rafiah, from Khan Yunis. They were working here in Ofakim. To tell you if I see that a situation that things like that will come back and be
Well, certainly not in any short term, obviously.
Not in the short term, and I don't think not in the next 40 years.
Right.
We are now not believing, most of the people in Ofakim do not believe in peace. Now they believe in a clear border, in a situation that we will have security around us, and it means very suspicious to our neighbors for now. Maybe through education, maybe from both sides. It needs to be education from both sides, because I grew up, my father originally is from Egypt, and I grew up in a place that we read the Quran, we knew the Quran, we were not afraid of the Islam, but something got changed. They got changed. We were also, some of our people are changed. So to tell you that we are optimistic, no. But one thing for sure, Ofakim is a strong community. I'm going to stay in Ofakim. Ofakim, it's my home. And I love the people here. And I believe that we will be stronger, and we will cherish the memory of those one who, thanks to them, we are alive.
All right, Kochi Abu Aron, thank you for joining us. I would like to thank Colonel Olivia Rafowitz and Jonathan Regev. And I'd like to end on this note. As Olivia noted, it's the first night of Hanukkah holiday in which the Jews of the Maccabees had to fight for their freedom, for their own security. Yes, there was a miracle, the miracle of the lamp, but that miracle only came after a hard-fought, hard-won military victory by the Maccabees. And that is the spirit that still animates Israel today as it fights this latest war, its war against Hamas. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News for this special broadcast.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I-24 News.
Hello and welcome to this special broadcast here on I-24 News. 2 months of war here in Israel. First day of Hanukkah tonight. The most somber candle lighting this nation had. 138 menorahs lit up the Western Wall this evening. One for every hostage still being held captive by Hamas and the Gaza Strip. 2 months on, the threats from south to north remain, and talks of big fences and big walls are paving their way back to the center of the discourse. But the issue is not this fence or another. The only question is what is happening on the other side of it. 2 months on, light must prevail. But when? The beginning of the end or the end of the beginning? We unpack it all here tonight, and we want to begin this broadcast by heading down south to the southern city of Ofakim. I-24 News senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev standing by there. Jonathan, before you give us the latest on what is happening in the Strip itself tonight, the IDF confirms the deaths of 2 additional Israeli soldiers who were killed in combat. One of them, the son of war cabinet member and former chief of staff Gadi Eisenkot. Chillingly enough, when he and Benny Gantz joined the war cabinet, he told one of his partners that he will conduct the war as if his daughter is kidnapped and his son is at the front lines.
Yes, and this is exactly what happened. This is the story of the Israeli army, the People's Army. Everybody goes to the army. You can assume that if you're a son of the chief of staff, you have so many opportunities not to join a combat unit and not to be in reserves and not to volunteer. But the son of Gadi Eisenkot did not choose that path. He understood that just like his father was a brave warrior for the state of Israel, he must do the same, and paid with his life. A very sad, very sad news coming today. The death of every soldier is extremely sad, but this also has this very sad irony that comes along with it, and clearly a devastating story.
Yes, indeed. Too many Israeli soldiers who are being killed while protecting the homeland. And Jonathan, to that point, exactly a day of yet another day of intense fighting throughout the Gaza Strip in the south, but not just that, also in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, tying up loose ends, so to speak. What can you tell us?
Yes, as far as incoming fire towards Israel, this day was more intense in the north than in the south. We had an Israeli citizen killed on the Gaza border from anti-tank fire coming from Lebanon towards Israel. There were various instances of fire from Lebanon to Israel and also from Syria to Israel. The northern front may not be as intense as the Gaza front in this war, but it's a very concerning issue and one that Israel will have to deal with, because let's remember, tens of thousands of Israelis from northern Israel, I'm not speaking of the Gaza border, but from northern Israel, are displaced from their homes. They will not go back until they feel complete safety. That complete safety is when Hezbollah is away from the border.
Yes, and we're already seeing some diplomatic efforts gaining steam in this respect. We will get more further into that later on in the broadcast. But Jonathan, before we let you go, give us the latest on the humanitarian aid that is entering the Strip. We know that fuel and a whole lot of it is getting into the Gaza Strip.
Yes, as opposed to what Israel said at the beginning, no fuel whatsoever. Fuel is coming in. First of all, this is the request of the American administration, and there's clearly a certain limit as to how much Israel can say no to the American administration that has been backing Israel so fiercely since this war began. Also, perhaps as part of negotiations that could perhaps lead to visits of the Red Cross of the Israeli hostages. So yes, fuel is coming in.
Yet, this is the first time this equation is created, fuel in exchange for Red Cross access, even though we will continue to stress it, that Red Cross access to civilian hostages should not be enshrined in any agreement. It should be the default, but this is Fortunately not the case. I-24 News senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev, thank you very much for this. And from south, we're heading north now. I-24 News senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran standing by there with the I-24 News team. Ariel, another busy day in the north, a day of war. Hezbollah claiming responsibility for no less than 11 attacks just today.
That's right, Ellie. Another day of war, as you put it. Just a short while ago, on the Lebanese side, reports of Israeli artillery in the area of the southern Lebanese town of Belida, that is just across Malkia in the north of the Upper Galilee. And that follows, as you mentioned, 11 Hezbollah attacks. The last one about a couple hours ago, anti-tank missile attack on one of the IDF border posts. There are no reports of injuries in that, but indeed earlier today there was an Israeli civilian who was killed as a result of one of these anti-tank missile attacks in the area of Matat. He was a 54-year-old farmer from Gesher Haziv. That's one of the communities in the north that has not been evacuated, but the area of Matat has, as many farmers in the area have returned to try and save what they can of their produce. Throughout the day, Israel carrying out multiple airstrikes, the latest a few hours ago. In its latest statement, the IDF saying that fighter jets have been targeting different Hezbollah infrastructure, including an operational command and control center. And I should note that deadly attack in the northern part in Matat coincided with a visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi. They were visiting up north in the Northern Command, holding a situation assessment. And then Netanyahu, when he was visiting one of the artillery batteries in the Upper Galilee, he sent a warning message to Hezbollah in the midst of this fighting. Let's take a listen to what he said.
If Hezbollah decides to start an all-out war, they will turn with their own hands Beirut and southern Lebanon, which is not located very far from here, into Gaza and Khan Yunis. We are determined to bring victory.
And Ariel, briefly before we let you go, we do hear more reports about the American diplomatic push to reach about some sort of a solution to the Hezbollah threat, as Washington made it clear time and time again. It does not want to see Israel engaging in a full-blown war with Hezbollah, essentially finally reinforcing the existing UN resolution. Or seeking to.
Well, if we're talking about, enforcing the UN Resolution 1701, which prohibits Hezbollah maintaining any weapons or military infrastructure south of the Litani River, there's a lot to be done regarding that. And that is one of the questions, whether is that what Israel is going to pursue following its war in Gaza, because as its residents here in the north have said, and also the leaders of Israel themselves, they're very aware of this northern threat of Hezbollah's presence right along the border. And obviously it's not a threat that can just be passed by as if it doesn't exist. Obviously the recent history proves that something does need to be done, or at least that is the care, the concern of the locals here. But indeed also the United States and the rest of Israel's allies are aware of that need. But there is also a lot of intent to discuss it properly and to try to avoid the pictures coming out from Gaza repeating themselves in Lebanon. Obviously, this is a threat that Netanyahu and Gallant have been issuing multiple times to Lebanon, as to Hezbollah, as we've just heard. But the situation is very complicated and concerning.
Well, intent is one thing, results something completely different. I-24 News Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran, thank you very much for this, and we want to now welcome here in studio Professor Uzi Rabi, Director of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle East Studies and Senior Researcher at the Center for Iranian Studies at the Tel Aviv University. Professor Rabi, thank you very much for joining us. Let's begin, if you will, on the Northern Front. It's not always just about the what, but the who, and the who in this respect is particularly interesting because we're talking about White House official Amos Hochstein, who orchestrated not so long ago, the maritime border agreement between Israel and Lebanon. And yet I repeat, Israel and Lebanon, not Israel and Hezbollah. When push comes to shove, Hezbollah is going to adhere to what? To the non-existent government in Beirut or to Tehran?
And this is actually the thing itself. Well, I think that Israel should welcome any efforts, actually, to make Hezbollah implement, actually, or the implementation of 1701.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of a must. Otherwise, those guys, actually, Israelis, who were told, actually, to just, evacuate themselves, are the displaced citizens of Israel.
Refugees in their own country, from north to south.
Exactly. Actually, they won't get back to their homes. And basically, as we said before, this is not kind of a thing which has to do with the ruled and rulers relationships in Israel. This is something that has to do with the Zionist ethos. We have to make them go back, and it goes without saying that they are not going to do that as long as actually those Radwan forces of Hezbollah are literally on the fence. So basically, I take it as kind of a diplomatic effort. In my view, it would be futile, and that would be to set the stage for a military, in my opinion, Israeli attack on Hezbollah, in order to force Hezbollah to just set back, to get, to retreat to the northern part of the Litani River.
So if in the south we're seeing a military push in order to bring about some sort of a diplomatic resolution, here you're saying it's the other way around.
The opposite.
First diplomatic attempt that will lead us to a military push.
This is exactly because I don't believe that Iran and neither Hezbollah actually are going actually to, to agree to implement it and to just go back. And this is why I think that we are at a very crucial moment, because Israel is not dealing 100% with the north, and the main focus is Gaza. I don't understand clearly, I must say, actually, what Israel's strategy regarding the north is. And this is very, very bad, because when it comes to the citizens, they are, disoriented. They don't know exactly, actually, what the end game would be.
Right.
And they have the right to be suspicious about Israeli intentions, because they don't want the recurrence of the same scenario of the south at their home. So basically,
so this linear approach of Israel, first addressing this threat, then the other one, you're suggesting
I suggest
might be wrong.
I suggest that it is being capitalized on by Nasrallah, partially,
because he knows that the Israeli attention
he knows
is
that
elsewhere.
Israel, actually, this is what Israel says, and he running sort of a limited war against Israel. By itself, this could definitely be considered by him as sort of a victory.
Yeah.
But it is for the time being. What I'm trying to say is that Israel has to just, compile sort of a well-arranged and well-thought strategy by which to create kind of a solution in the north. And the solution must actually include 1701, either by diplomatic means or militarily. I think that diplomatic means actually are just kind of, pretext to be used.
Yeah, we've seen what people were the first to leave the area when things happened. UNIFIL, the same forces that were supposed to enforce that.
In any case, Israel, in the aftermath of the 7th of October, Israel must actually deal with that in kind of a very fierce and harsh manner. because this is actually what is going to be learned in the Middle East about Israel's performance. It's not only actually...
For years to come. For years to come. And Professor Rabi, let's shift the focus back to what's happening down south in the Gaza Strip, and perhaps the best indication to what is happening is not the IDF statements or the remarks of this or that leader, but rather what we hear from Gazans themselves. Let's take a listen.
بدي أوجه رسالتي إلى حكومة حماس. حسبي الله عليك، والله يلعنك ويلعن أبوك ويلعن اللي جابك، والله يلعنك يا سنوار يا ابن الكلب. حسبي الله عليك، دمرتنا. ايش المعاناة اللي انت بتعانيها الآن؟ هجرنا من غزة على خانونس، ومن خانونس على رفح، افترقنا احنا واهلنا واولادنا ونسواننا. سلم هالأسرى هالكلاب اللي عندك. السنمار تحت الارض متخبي هو والضيف والقرف اللي زيه. احنا ميه مش ملاقيين السنوار.
الوضع صعب، لا تدخل مساعدات.
ما في المساعدات كلها نازله تحت. المساعدات ما بيجوا للامه ولا بيجي للشعب كله.
حج كثير بيوصل، اللي بيوصل إشي قليل وبيتوزع هيك بيحكوا.
كله للبيوت إلهم. خليهم ياخذون ولا يطخون ولا يعملوا اللي بدهم اياه حماس.
Professor Uzi Rabi, these are Gazans talking against Hamas from within the Gaza Strip. I personally do not recall such statements since Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip way back when. And we do need to connect that to two other occurrences today. One, the surrender of Hamas terrorists elsewhere in the Strip. And third, the black and white proof of what the son of Ismail Haniyeh has been doing while the people of Gaza were suffering. Blood diamonds, buying diamonds worth a whole lot of money, 2 years of a salary for the average Gazan. Connecting these three issues, it doesn't look too good for Hamas, yet doesn't mean that they're about to kneel.
And this is a campaign Israel should just, promote. I can tell you that while looking at Khan Yunis, the second capital city of Gaza, so to speak, the place where actually Muhammad Def and Yahya Sinwar and Muhammad al-Def were given birth.
Right.
This is actually their basically original spot. They have all their energy there. And when it comes to what we see here, we have to bear in mind that 1 million Gazans coming from the north are there. 1/3 of Khan Yunis population is making sort of a small exodus either to the sea or Rafah or Rafah. And here comes the other thing. Gazans are so confused, deprived of almost everything, especially those who came from the north, that what we do here in the recent days is complaints of all sorts against Hamas. We got kind of an indication here.
Yeah.
But if I take actually the three examples actually you just gave us, and all these are being gathered to kind of a nucleus that one should hope would become kind of a small mutiny against Hamas, because people are with their back against the wall.
Right.
Now actually nobody can, tell stories. No way back to the north of the Gaza Strip. People are being asked actually to just move here and there. And here comes another indication. When those actually, the aid coming from the out and the lorries are getting into Gaza, they are being guarded by, armed military
Hamas
men,
militants, yeah.
because Hamas is afraid of people actually taking and looting actually this all these
looting. They're fighting for their lives because
But I can tell that this thing is something which is of great importance.
Yes,
Israel is part of that, because all that stuff actually should be introduced into
and
Gaza.
yet when the ground is boiling, the direction that Hamas will be sending the population might be further south, as into the border with Egypt, and Egypt could not have been more clear-cut about its own red lines, no crossing into Egypt, and by that Hamas may be theoretically creating a problem between Egypt and Israel.
Yeah, and look at the photos of those actually Hamas militiamen who were surrendered.
Yeah.
Actually, the way they are being introduced in these photos is to humiliate Hamas in the eyes of Gaza.
Of their leaders.
Yep.
Yes, we will put a stop right here, Professor Rabi, but we will, of course, continue to unpack the situation because we want to head now to another battlefield. Not that anyone needed further proof that there is something severely off with the moral compass of the UN lately. Now comes this. Secretary General Antonio Guterres has invoked a rarely used provision of the UN Charter to urge the Security Council to take action on Gaza, saying it threatens the maintenance of international peace and security, not Hamas, but Israel. This is what the UN spokesperson had to say.
Given the scale of the loss of human life in Gaza and in Israel in such a short amount of time, the Secretary General has today delivered a letter to the President of the Security Council invoking Article 99 of the Charter of the United Nations. This is the first time that Antonio Guterres has done this since he became Secretary General in 2017. Article 99 states, and I quote, that the Secretary General may bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter in his opinion that may threaten the maintenance of international peace and security.
Turning now to I-24 News, a senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Altman. Owen, Article 99, what is it exactly? And perhaps more importantly, what does it mean in practice?
Look, it means that Antonio Guterres just gets to come out and say that he sees this as a big threat, sends it over to the Security Council for deliberation. It has a lot of symbolic meaning, and I certainly can understand why the Israeli government or the Israeli public would be upset about this in principle. It wasn't used, for example, in the Ukraine war, right, which is a much, much bigger threat to international peace and security and geopolitics than this war. Whatever the humanitarian situation, as sad as it is in the Gaza Strip. So I can certainly understand that. That said, it doesn't have a lot of practical relevance. It's going to go to the Security Council. The United States is still there. The British government is still there, and others are still there. We've seen how the Security Council has functioned over the course of the war, finally passing a resolution that, of course, included a call for a humanitarian pause. But Ellie also included a call for the hostages to be freed, as I often say on our shows, unconditionally, not through a deal, right? Unconditionally, and the Russians didn't veto that. But anyway, circling back, I can understand why people are upset. But at the end of the day, this is not in itself a diplomatic disaster for Israel. And when you actually listen carefully to what Senator Harj said, and more importantly, when you actually look carefully at the letter that Guterres, you see it's not really a disaster for Israel. He comes out and very clearly condemns October 7th and names Hamas. Maybe the clearest language Guterres has used about that. And then goes on to just factually describe the humanitarian situation in Gaza. He doesn't explicitly point a finger of blame at Israel. I think it's a fair interpretation, right, looking at the letter and looking at the context to interpret that as being what he's doing. And I admit, to use the Hebrew phrase, maybe a little rosh katan to say otherwise, narrow-headed. But that said, the letter is not a disaster. The move to the Security Council is not a disaster. It generated a very harsh reaction from Foreign Minister Eli Cohen and from the Israeli government. But Eli, I think that's less because of this act and not because of what Guterres is doing in the present, and much more because of what Guterres did in the past. The moment Antonio Guterres came out and said that the October 7th massacres, quote, did not happen in a vacuum, he burned all bridges forever with the Israeli government and the Israeli public, and generated the kind of very, very harsh reaction we saw then. And that's the harsh reaction that continues. So I think the reaction to this letter and this move is less about the letter and the move per se, and more about Guterres' record in the recent past on this issue, which certainly is worthy of condemnation from the Israeli government. As for this, again, when you really take a closer look at it, I don't think it's something that is any kind of meaningful diplomatic event for Israel. By the way, for example, we saw the European Union Foreign Policy Chief, Joseph Borrell, come in and say that he supports the call, and others. Borrell may not be Israel's best friend internationally, but he's also not Israel's most hostile, outside actor. So again, this appeals to wider constituencies who certainly would not necessarily endorse what Guterres has done in the past. And what he's done in the past, I think, is a kind of momentum that is generating the kind of reactions we've seen over the course of the last day.
But this is crucial and so important that you're pointing it out, Owen, because we here so often are pointing out at other figures or entities or institutions that are, pursuing this go-to automatic reaction without really examining what happened or what has been said. And here too, you're saying yes, in the greater scheme of things, Guterres is not perhaps hiding his sentiment when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war. But at this specific time, hold your horses. This is not it.
Well, it's not a welcome development from Israel's perspective. This isn't something Israeli foreign ministry would want. Of course. It's not something they would support. They certainly wouldn't endorse the letter. Obviously, the part that condemns October 7th, yes. But the rest, and might take issue with some of the descriptions of the facts of the humanitarian situation, certainly wouldn't believe and has argued that Israel is not to blame for it. Again, I don't think the letter comes out and explicitly blames Israel for it. And even you heard very carefully in that statement the tremendous loss of life in Gaza and in Israel that they said. Again, of course, the flavor here is very different. I certainly accept that. But again, on its own, standing on its own, had Guterres not made the in a vacuum comments, I don't think that this move would have generated the kind of anger and the kinds of reactions that it has. But he did make that comment. And he burned his bridges forever with the Israeli government and public. I like to think that he sees that in retrospect as a mistake. But again, I think we can't be sure of that.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait for the memoir. But this is why we turn to you, Owen Alterman, to call out not just others, but us too. Thank you very much for this, Owen Alterman. A quick break, and we'll be back here with all the analysis. Don't go anywhere.
ללא מעט אנשים בזיכרון וכמובן עמדת הדי-ג'יי, תביאו את העצים במיוחד. Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra, Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en i24 News.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. And we want to put aside for a moment the strategy and the tactics and all the diplomatic maneuvers and talk about the people. Gal Gilboa Dalal, who himself survived the Nova Festival massacre. His brother Guy still being held hostage in the Gaza Strip by Hamas terrorists there. Gal, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. We do know that it is the opposite of easy to, again, relive those moments with every such interview, so we appreciate your time. First of all, how are you?
It's a hard question. It's easy question that have a really hard. It's really hard to answer right now. In these days. I mean, the days are hard. You wake up, you're feeling really not optimistic about everything, and sometimes you get a little bit hopeful when you hear some things, and then you're going back to be not very much optimistic, and it's like a roller coaster.
Yes, an understatement perhaps. It might, as counterintuitive as it may sound, be easier to speak about Guy. When was the last time you got any indication about him? Some of the hostages that were released provided some information, perhaps something from them on Guy?
None, actually. Our last indication about my brother was from the day he was kidnapped. We had a video of him being hostage inside Gaza already, probably inside tunnels because it was in a dark room. And ever since this video, we haven't received any piece of information, any sign of life, nothing really.
Yes, and we do unfortunately hear more and more testimonies about what captivity looks and feels like. I can only imagine what goes through your mind.
Yeah, our family are really devastated right now, hearing the testimony from the people who returned from there. It shocked us, none of us really expected that they're having, that they're keeping them in good conditions, but we never imagined how bad can it be. And right now, since we haven't heard a lot, and since they don't let the Red Cross go in or see the hostages' condition or let us anything, we're really afraid that he's being kept in really hard conditions.
And Gal, in this hell of reality, your brother Guy, a healthy young man, is quote unquote last on this devil's list.
Yeah, that's right. One thing that was very hard for us, it's when the ceasefire stopped and the hostages stopped returning, and we know that when they postponed it, it's also postponed the time when my brother will come back, and we know that he will come back probably with the last deal, and yeah, it's very hard because the time here is weird. It's feeling like we're stuck on the same day, and even though you can see that it's been 63 days already, 62 days already since he was kidnapped, and it's so much time. I mean, it feels like eternity when you think about it.
Gal, it's the first day of Hanukkah, lighting the first candle tonight. We, all of us here, really do hope that your brother will be able to light at least one of those candles with you back here at home, and that light will prevail. Gal Gilboa Dalal, thank you so very much for speaking with us. We're sending a lot of strength from here in the studio.
Thank you.
All right, taking a deep breath now and shifting the focus overseas because over the course of the war, Israelis kept a nervous eye on trends in U.S. politics, and with a Democratic president in the White House, a particular eye on how Democrats see the war and Israel. Senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman updates us on the latest polling from across the ocean.
It's a healthy obsession. The tendency in Israel and among American Jews to take a microscope to American polling on Israel. And so a new poll is getting some attention, since it shows U.S. President Joe Biden winning over more Democrats to his policies on the war in Gaza.
I've encouraged the Prime Minister to focus on trying to reduce the number of casualties while he is attempting to eliminate Hamas.
A month ago, polling from the AP and NORC showed a 50% approval rating among Democrats for Biden's stance on the war. That number has now ticked up to 59%. The question is why? One answer: polling was done just after the week-long pause in the war, with memories of freed hostages fresh and the fighting itself only starting to return. Another answer: that the Biden administration's policies themselves drove the change, the growing emphasis on protecting Gazan civilians and in moving humanitarian aid.
We're still talking about trying to find a way forward on hostages. We're talking about sustaining and expanding the humanitarian assistance, making it into Gaza.
In the big picture of U.S. politics, the movement in these polls does not matter much. Election day is almost a year away, and the campaign will be fought on other issues. For Israel, the impact is a bit bigger. Israel's standing among U.S. Democrats has become an issue of huge strategic importance. With the war, those voters are now paying attention and forming opinions on Israel for the long term. So any shard of information will get looked at. Again, it's a healthy obsession.
Heading now to New York, I-24 News' senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim joining us. Mike, thank you very much for your time tonight. Well, let's begin with this. The DOJ announcing it is now investigating the killings and kidnappings of Americans during and after the October 7th onslaught. What does it mean, this investigation?
Well, it's very, very preliminary at this point, obviously, and the U.S. will be working hand in hand with Israel on this investigation here. Some 30 years ago, U.S. Congress passed a law allowing for the United States to investigate and prosecute war crimes against American citizens overseas. And it's just now, after 30 years being utilized for the first time, the U.S. announcing an indictment against 4 Russian soldiers for the torture of an American in the war against Ukraine. So now, possibly, it'll be utilized the second time, but this very much in its infancy here. But the DOJ, together with the FBI, which operates under the auspices of the Department of Justice, involved in the Israel-Hamas conflict in a number of ways, nominally looking at potential threats entering the United States. The U.S. has sounded the alarm about the potential threats there within the U.S., possibly Hamas operatives, Iranian operatives passing over the southern border. So this takes on a new dimension here with this investigation of potential war crimes on October 7th itself.
And Micah, this past hour, we keep on speculating. What does it mean, this international clock, exactly the Christmas clock, if you will, or simply put, how much time does Israel have to conclude its operations in the Gaza Strip? And this hour, the Deputy National Security Advisor is saying we did not provide Israel with any time limit. And this is, from Israeli standpoint, very good news.
Yeah, and you and I were on a couple of hours ago, and I told you I didn't feel there was a clock that was really hanging over, and that proves to be so here, at least according to the that National Security Council representative. We've been talking about this for a while now, that there have been reports, and Antony Blinken had made it clear, apparently, to Israeli officials during visits to Israel that, in fact, there would be some type of a clock deadline in which the United States would force Israel to wrap up operations. Again, if they're asking for Israel to be more targeted, to make sure the civilian population in Gaza is not unnecessarily hit, you can't do that and say, hey, you've got to eliminate Hamas with a ticking clock going in a week. Or it just doesn't make any sense. You've got to pick one or the other, or at least have some sort of balance here. And I think the United States is coming to that realization within the Biden administration that you can't eliminate Hamas and also do it with a clock over your head here. There's just no purpose behind that, ergo the statement we heard about an hour ago.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Mike, a quick trip to Capitol Hill. Senate Republicans blocking a further debate on a $100 billion plus proposal to aid of not just Israel, but Ukraine and Taiwan. What's next on that?
Tough going here, and you know it's tough to get agreement on anything when you're talking about the Senate or Congress as a whole these days. They'll go back into negotiations here, but Democrats are upset. They said, you know, we should never really have started these negotiations to begin with, meaning they should not have offered up potential hardened border security issues in exchange for Ukraine aid or Israel aid. And Ukraine or Israel aid, though they have their detractors within the halls of Congress, are generally a bipartisan issue. So Democrats say, you know what, we've kind of put ourselves in a corner here and even offering this up as a potential concession. Nevertheless, it looks like they'll move forward with talks here, but it's hard going now, and this has really become not an Israel or Ukraine issue specifically, but more of a border security issue, foreign policy in exchange for domestic policy. It really isn't done very often in Congress. This might be one of those rare occasions where those two issues are tied together legislatively.
I-24 News senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, thank you very, very much for this. Are you a Jew? Sorry, not sorry. You cannot use this bathroom. This is not Berlin, 1938. This is Oakland, California, 2023.
Also, currently, this is a private property. I want to go into the restroom. I do need you to leave.
I know Israel loves taking private property and saying it's their own, but we gotta head.
You're not going to let me go into the restroom?
Them, so I need you to leave.
I want you to go into the restroom.
I need you to leave, please.
I was patron here, and I have a right to go into the restroom.
And we have a right to refuse service.
Yeah, but I need to go into the restroom.
I'm asking you to leave.
No, you need to let me go into the restroom.
I don't.
I'm a patron here, and I need to go to the restroom.
I'm kindly asking you to leave.
No, I will not be going to leave.
I'm kindly asking you to leave.
Okay.
So can you please?
No, I want to go into the restroom.
That's fine. You can use our restroom. We have a restroom next door. You can use
I want to use
It's a restroom.
It's a no. I should not be excluded and other people allowed.
They are clearly saying no.
I want to go into the restroom.
And what is standing here going to do?
You're not going to let me into the restroom?
You can use our other restroom. We have another restroom.
I want to use this one.
They're not letting you use
All
you
don't
get is a video of it saying that Zionism is
why are you afraid? If you agree with it, why are you afraid that I will take a picture of you?
Oh, actually, yeah, great. Please.
Why, if you agree with it, why are you afraid?
I'm not afraid of it.
Then why are you not letting me in?
Because this is what you're
doing. Yeah.
History didn't start in 1948, lady. Free Palestine. Now free Palestine. It's always. Please leave. Thank you. It's always. Yeah. Great. We love it. Thank you very much.
And we're heading now to New York, where we're being joined by the one, the only David Christopher Kaufman, adjunct fellow at the Tel Aviv Institute. David, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I genuinely do not know what to ask. Again, it is Oakland, California, a so-called liberal bastion. If we were to see this video in black and white, it is again Berlin before the war.
Yeah, I mean, number one, happy Hanukkah to everybody, and thank you for having me. I'm a native Northern Californian and have spent much of my childhood in Oakland, California, and then have kept a close eye on Oakland, California over the last few years. And like its sister city, San Francisco, where I was raised, it's fallen into a state of kind of urban, cultural, and political disrepair. The city's broken, like much of Northern California, and this is just an example of what that breakdown in civic society has allowed to happen. this horrible instance of this woman not being allowed to use the bathroom, which is not only probably a crime, but perhaps could be prosecuted as a hate crime. This took place yesterday, but just a week ago or so, Oakland, California had a city council meeting where they were voting to condemn Israel for its incursion into Gaza, voting to call for a ceasefire, and speaker after speaker, like in this case, wearing masks, speaker after speaker got up and blasted Israel, called it a genocidal state, declared from the river to the sea, and questioned whether even Hamas had even attacked Israel, whether these people whether 1,200 Israelis had died, whether there had been mass rape, whether babies had been burned. So this is happening in a city where anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiments and doubt for October 7th is coming from the top.
And just to note, David, the owner of Farley's Cafe was quick, of course, to post an apologetic note. We are not anti-Semites. Unfortunate incident. And I wish I was inventing this. No parody would go so far, perhaps. And I'm quoting now, we're committed to ongoing staff training for a safe and welcoming environment. Yes, it's the lack of proper staff training and hospitality that's the issue here, which, again, it comes on the heels of this appalling congressional hearing we've seen earlier this week with university chiefs who essentially said, calling for the killing of Jews is A-OK. Now, in both cases, David, if it's not clear, perhaps let's just try to imagine the scope and scale of the uproar, and rightfully so, if the calls were to wipe out LGBTQ, or protests were held to restore slavery, or a person with a hijab not allowed to use a bathroom.
Yeah, I mean, bravo, you've totally hit the nail on the head. This is exactly the same type of behavior, sentiment, and lack of accountability and almost permission that we saw this past week on Capitol Hill by the presidents of major academic institutions and Ivy League schools that basically cannot bring themselves to say that we don't support calling for the genocide of Jews. We don't support calling for Israel's destruction. And this sort of open tolerance and lack of consequence for anti-Semitism and for anti-Israel language is really what is trickling down into these, both the hearings we heard on Capitol Hill, but as well as these isolated examples, and this isolated example after isolated example coming happening within a larger context of a tolerance for anti-Semitism from the top down. And what's interesting about Oakland in particular, why it's worth noting, is that Oakland is, very much a city, that's lawless. They don't have a police chief. They have one of the highest crime rates in California right now. Most of this is because Oakland saw new leadership come in that was funded by, far left, ultra progressive organizations such as those supported by George Soros. And these are the exact same far left, radical progressive organizations that are supporting anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, hatred towards Jews campaigns right now. So it's the same funder pool. It's the same philosophy. It's going from the schools to the academy to City Hall. And the result of this is sort of a lawlessness on the street that has found its perfect storm in anti-Semitism.
And then, by the way, just to know that only yesterday, public school teachers, we're talking young kids, not universities, public school teachers there in Oakland presented this pro-Palestinian lesson as part of this unauthorized teaching. And we're talking actual BDS material in the curriculum. But we will, save it for another day, because I do want to get your take on this, David, before we have to bid farewell. We had a lively debate here behind the scenes in the studios on whether shaming those anti-Semites online has some sort of a boomerang effect, as in, if they lose their jobs over this horrific incident, and by the way, they were not fired as of yet, they're not going to say, oh man, I must have done something really wrong. They're going to load on more hate. On the other hand, serving the cause or not, why should I care? If you're an anti-Semite, be a jobless anti-Semite.
I would kind of lean towards you, Ellie. I'm also into the jobless anti-Semites. I mean, there needs to be an aggressive demonstration of consequence for these behaviors. Last week, for instance, you had that example of the teacher here in New York who was sort of hiding in her own classroom because a mob of students found out that she was Zionist or Jewish and wouldn't let her out of the classroom. Well, what's supposed to happen to these kids? You know what I mean? Are they supposed to walk away scot-free? And if they're doing this to teachers at 14, 15, or 16, what's going to happen to them when they're 24, 25, 26? If we don't, and it won't necessarily be against Jews at that point. It could be against anybody. But because they got away with it as teenagers in a school in Queens, they probably think they can do this for their whole lives. So I don't have a problem with shaming people, and I think there should be consequence from the top down. But the key thing is the consequence, and what's missing here must come from the top. We saw it with a lack of accountability and a lack of leadership this week on Capitol Hill with the university presidents, and now we've seen it in Oakland, and the results are Jews hiding behind closed doors, terrified to use the most basic public services, and that is intolerable.
Well, at this point in time, when uncertainty and unclarity rules, if I'm thinking a bit like David Christopher Kaufman, I know I'm doing something right. Thank you so very much, David, for this. Happy Hanukkah as much as possible, of course. Back here in studio with Professor Uzi Rabi. Thank you very much, Professor Rabi, for powering through with us. I want us to shift our focus elsewhere.
But just one word.
Please.
This is really intolerable, but listen, I mean, this Gaza war has so many repercussions locally, regionally, and globally. Yeah. And now what we see is kind of a byproduct of that, if I may say so. It's what Jewishness is when it comes to Jewish communities all over the world.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the main things that must be reconsidered and reorientated by both Israel and Jewish diaspora is their actually interaction and close relationships. We have to just, reorganize things here, because this is not kind of a wave. This looks like a tsunami.
Yeah.
And basically this cocktail of ignorance, anti-Semitism, hypocrisy is becoming very dangerous, because in the public space, actually Jews are going to suffer as is the case in other actually fields of life. So basically this Gazan thing is not only, kind of a thing between Israel and Hamas. It has to do with the future of the Middle East. It has to do with so many things.
And ironically enough, this war began at the border, right?
Yeah.
Literally at the border. And yet it exceeds all geographical borders.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's so interesting what you just said. I mean, it was so local.
Yeah, literally a border.
Yeah. And look, actually, it went as far as actually the globe, the region. And, once you are using the map of the Middle East and the map of the globe, you can definitely foster two different directions of two axes. I mean, two sorts of axes. The first of which is Gaza, Hezbollah, Iran, Russia, China.
And to that point, exactly, because we don't have much time, I do want to get your take on that, Professor Rabi, because Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, whirlwind tour in the Gulf, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and back in Moscow meeting Iranian President Raisi, solid scheduling.
Well, I mean, this is it. I think that what made the United States to come back to its senses is not only this analogy between Hamas and ISIS, which was very, very harmful and very, very threatening in the eyes of the free world. It was also actually kind of a program that must be, bring America back, partially at least, to the Middle East.
Yeah.
And once we look at that, looking at this axis of Iran, China, and Russia, albeit there are many, many differences within it, but basically this is kind of a block that should be reckoned with.
It's not for nothing, by the way, connecting it to our earlier conversation with Mike Wagenheim on the American aid package, that it's an aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. You've just mentioned China, Russia, Iran.
Exactly. And this is why I think that, in the end of the day, we might we might have kind of a situation which would remind us, I guess, kind of a battle between the bad guys and good guys.
Yeah.
Something actually that we had seen after 9/11 or in the aftermath of Second World War. Basically, it has to do with the Middle East and the globe. And I do hope that this normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia that was thought of before October 7th is going actually to be revived, because this is part and parcel of actually a new Middle East somebody could think of after the demise of Hamas.
A new Middle East and a new world in that sense, because it's not just Saudi Arabia and Israel, it's India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Europe, US, and that takes us to what the Houthis are doing just now, trying to disrupt global trade, trying to disrupt exactly that.
If you take this axis of India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, you would find that this is kind of a breach.
Yeah.
In the midst of what the Chinese would say Belt and Road.
The Belt and Road Initiative, of course.
So this is something that
sometimes things are black and white.
Exactly.
The world is so complicated. Being a human is complicated, but sometimes, Professor Uzi Rabi,
fully agree with you.
Sometimes things are simple. All right, you might be staying a bit longer with us because we're taking a very quick break. But when we get back, we take you live again to the field, to the southern border of Israel for the latest on the war there, and also continue to unpack what is happening, what will be happening. And of course, we will not dare to end this program without some optimism on this Festival of Light that began today here. So a very quick break, and we'll be back with all the latest.
Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. The special broadcast here on I-24 News. 2 months since October 7th. 2 months of war here in Israel. And still with us here in studio, Professor Uzi Rabi, Director of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle East Studies, the Tel Aviv University. Professor Uzi Rabi, thank you very much for staying with us. I want us to take a look now at what's happening on the Palestinian side, not just inside the Gaza Strip when it comes to this mounting anger that is directed for the first time in many years, if at all, towards Hamas. There are reports of some, harsh or harshening rhetoric between Fatah officials and Hamas officials. Now, the notion is that the Palestinian Authority is a crucial part of any day after agreement, and yes, as much as it is difficult to say it out loud, there is a notion that some Hamas officials will be integrated into the political Palestinian landscape.
Well, Israel should actually prevent such an eventuality, because there are so many things that Israel actually has taken an oath to do, which is not something which is just kind of a whim.
Yeah.
This is basically a must. We have to do that. Once again, we have to send the right message in the Middle East. Once and for all. Let's make sure that the stuff that must be delivered to the neighborhood, so to speak, in kind of a way that would be very, very clear. This is high time for Israel to do that. It's for its own future. So basically, when you come up with kind of a rumor or something, or kind of a thinking by which to make that kind of a blend, this, in my opinion, actually must be nipped in the bud.
And yet, Professor Rabi, perhaps playing devil's advocate here for a second, if we're looking at the level of control, or rather lack thereof, when it comes to the Palestinian Authority over the West Bank, not just in terms of practical control, but in terms of popular support, can future Palestinian leadership has any legitimacy from the people without representation of the ones they like?
Well, listen, I mean, it's the right point, because this is so weak a leadership, and when the Americans are coming up with their October 6th thinking, by which actually to just have Gaza part and parcel of the Palestinian Authority, and Abu Mazen or his successor are going to run the whole thing.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, there must be kind of a dramatic change in the Palestinian Authority in order to start thinking about that. I would deal with the educational system. I would deal with so many things. I myself think that Gaza should be a separated item by which to come up with out-of-the-box solution, where we have some Arab states who are very thrilled to see actually the Middle East get rid of Hamas. This is kind of a blessed move. If that would happen, I'm pretty sure that many Arab states are going to speak differently, and that might pave the way for kind of a coalition, I would say, European, American, and Arab states. Egypt on the one hand, rich Arab states, in order to bring Gaza into kind of a different place or spot, different thinking, and maybe kind of a different future.
Yes, the day after is not so far away, but still the image of which seems far-fetched.
Anyway, the day after is not kind of a fixed idea.
Right. It's
there must be a transitional phase, so it would take time. But this is actually basically the idea.
Let's jump back to Israel's South. I-24 News senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev standing by there. Jonathan, let's wrap up this week. We are entering this holiday weekend, albeit no holiday spirit, that's for certain. How can we summarize this week in terms of the fighting underground?
It was, I think, 2 days ago when Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi said that whoever thinks that Israel will not be able to jump back into fighting, he's proved it completely wrong. It was just a week ago, believe it or not. It was just a week ago when we were still speaking of hostage deals and hostages coming back. But as of a Friday morning, practically a week ago, fighting resumed, and we're seeing now how the IDF was very quick to jump into full-scale fighting in Jabalia, in Sajaiya in the northern West Bank, in Khan Yunis in the southern West Bank, the southern Gaza Strip, I mean, and with ground forces all over the place. So yes, the first week of the second phase is coming to an end. Israel believes that with more pressure, with more military pressure, eventually could lead the Hamas first possibly to another hostage deal, and then later on to its elimination.
I-24 News senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev, thank you very, very much for this. Now, 2 months into the war, the haunting tales of Hamas captivity persist. Day in, day out, unveiling the unimaginable struggles faced by Chen Goldstein Almog and her 3 children, Agam, Gal, and Tal, just recently freed on November 26 as part of this temporary ceasefire. Their family now sharing a chilling account that intertwines the anguish of captivity with the heartbreaking loss suffered in the Hamas attack on October 7th. Take a look.
Chen and the children are back, the grandchildren.
Wow.
Wow, it was hard. Everything mixed with everything. The sadness and the joy. They returned from a black place. They returned to no home. They returned to no father. They returned to no sister. But they returned alive.
10 days after Chen Goldstein Almog and her 3 children, Agam, 17, Tal, 11, and Gal, 9, were released from Hamas captivity. They're trying to cope with life after the nightmare in Gaza.
First of all, they are very afraid of every movement, of every peep that happens around them.
From every peep they heard, they went straight with the Kalashnikov. He even laughed that one of them once went with the Kalashnikov upside down.
I've been sleeping next to them for the past few nights. The whole family sleeps together now.
This is the first time they've asked to sleep with you, probably since they were little, right?
Yes.
There was a friend here with 2 small dogs, and they played with them here. They ran around. And right down here, they took down the cushions of the sofas, and they built a tunnel for them, for the dogs. A few minutes earlier, Gal's teacher was here, and she asked him, "Were you in the tunnel?" So he told her yes. He told her it's like an Arab house, and he did that with it. And you could stand? Did you have to crawl? No, I didn't crawl. I stood.
They're talking about the army's bombs, which scared the children terribly.
The children less, but it finished them. Chen, Ayal, it finished them completely.
The bombings?
Yeah, it destroys our soul.
How were they treated?
Kept as bargaining chips. In the end, they came back, and they are healthy, and everything is fine.
On the morning of the abduction from Kfar Aza, Chen, her husband, Nadav, and their 4 children entered the safe room. Chen said that the terrorists felt at home in the kibbutz.
Everything was completely quiet. Slowly, they chose a car, drove, crossed the border, opened the trunk, loaded the bodies they saw. The terrorists continued to drive. Agam said to the boys, "Look forward, just not back. 7 minutes. And you're inside Gaza."
When the army arrived in the evening, they discovered that Nadav, the father, and Yam, the eldest daughter, had been murdered.
One of the things that preoccupied us during the 51 days that they were gone is whether they even knew that there is no longer a father and eldest daughter.
They knew Nadav was badly injured. And as for Yam, Chen saw that she was not alive.
The way they finally found out in Gaza that Nadav and Yam were murdered is unimaginable.
From time to time, they let them listen to a transistor for a limited period. So they heard Giora say that Yam and Nadav were no longer alive.
Every morning I come here to the pictures in the room, which were given to us to sit Shiva, and I shed my tears in front of Nadav and Yam.
They heard in Gaza their grandfather.
In Gaza, yes.
On the last day in captivity, when they were finally on their way back from Gaza to Israel, they went through some very difficult hours.
Agam said she was more afraid with the Red Cross than in captivity, because the Red Cross is like, there are no weapons, there's nothing, they travel in a car, because of the crowd around them, and no one was watching over them. When Chen came to the hospital, she said, "How long did it take you?" They also had a phase where they thought they were being sacrificed for the war.
Chen, Agam, Tal, and Gal returned home and discovered that they had no home, and Kibbutz Kfar Aza was almost completely destroyed.
The injustices and the pain will be with us as long as there is a soul in us, and it will not be forgotten.
If we know how to direct our lives between embracing and helping and between finding the moment for ourselves to process our grief, yes, then we will have, I think, reasonable, good lives. But first this.
The return of all the abductees.
All of the abductees.
Until the last one.
Until the last one.
It's a harsh segue from this to that, but all of them, they all say politics later, and yet they all engage in politics now. Israeli politicians are setting the ground for a political reshuffle, or rather stalemate. Today it was a political departure that perhaps made it even clearer that the clock is ticking backwards towards Election Day here in Israel, and we want to welcome here in studio Yariv Oppenheimer, project director of the Two-State Coalition in the Geneva Initiative, and Josh Hasten, international spokesperson for the Gush Etzion Regional Council. Thank you very, very much, gentlemen, for joining us. We appreciate it. Well, let's begin with the latest. Yariv, Merav Michaeli, the labor leader until this morning, resigning. According to all recent polls, not even passing the electoral threshold. It was in the stars to an extent, and yet it does seem to be some sort of a trigger to the race. If and when.
It is a trigger to the race, but I'm not so sure that the Labour Party will be the main platform for this race. We know about some other actors that would like to have their own party, and eventually there will be a united party, and the question will be who is going to lead it. So I'm not so sure that the race for the head of the Labour Party will be the big race of the opposition, or even the left wing of the opposition in Israel. But still, it's an important event, politically wise, because Merav Michaeli was a symbol of the mistake that the left wing did, not united before the election, and eventually giving the result of the election to the right wing. Although they didn't overcome in a landslide, they got a much bigger majority because of the threshold. Therefore, I think it's a good sign, and hopefully it will also start a process of an election atmosphere all around the system, something that Netanyahu maybe will have difficult time to stop and to prevent.
Well, before we perhaps discuss a bit further what and how is a leftist revival going to look like, because obviously in the current state of affairs there's not much left of the Israeli left, if any at all. Josh Hasten, on the other side of the divide, the main focus is perhaps what's happening in the Likud party itself. A controversial budget, a route to second and third readings, and there are fears that that Likud members will vote against it.
Well, first, I'd like to say I think that your guest in studio, Yariv, I think he should take over the Labor Party, and I might disagree with 90 plus things that he says, but Yariv, now's your time, my man. Now's your time to start and revive your party.
If you have members of the Labour Party that are going to support me, let's talk about the.
All right,
let's talk about it after the interview, but it will not happen. Not this time.
We'll talk later. But in terms of the Likud and whatnot, again, the state budget at this point, from what I understand, can still be rectified. There can still be changes. I know that some of the Likud members are upset by the current arrangement, and the first reading of the bill passed, and I know Nir Barkat and others, but they can make some changes and come to compromises. Listen, as we're talking here, this is all politics right now, and the state budget has to be passed, and we're in the middle of the war, and I have no doubt it will be passed. So they can make some revisions, they can make some changes, and I think at the end of the day, even those Likud members who are opposed at this juncture, I have a strong feeling they will go ahead and sign off on the second and third reading when push comes to shove.
Yeah, we're speaking about politics, but we need to be clear. Politicians are the one to win this war. Politicians are the one to make the decision whether to continue fighting or to stop in order to release the hostages. Politicians are making the decision who will get money in this very difficult year ahead. So it's about politics. We cannot just ignore politics. Politics, it's not just a game of power. It's also our life. And what we are seeing from this coalition and from this budget is that this coalition is obligated to survive. It's not obligated to the Israeli society in such a crucial time. And this is what we see from the budget. The budget is going to serve the political allies of Netanyahu in order for him to survive as prime minister and not to have an early election. This is unfair. This is not the right thing to do for the Israeli public. This is not the right thing to do for Israel in the middle of the war, to have such a budget that neglect the people that needs the support and the funding, and giving the money to the Orthodox religious, to the settlers, to the people
and they
that politically
do, of
Netanyahu
course,
depends on them.
And the ultra-Orthodox and the religious Zionism, they all deserve their chunks of the share. And yet, Mr. Haston, you know, we keep on talking about this misconception that got shattered, this October 6th state of mind and October 7th state of mind. When it comes to the budget, it seems that it's a budget that is relevant to October 6th.
Well, let me just say for the record, I think it's extremely important. You mentioned the funding for the Jewish communities of Judea and Samaria. I think that's integral right now. And we saw what happened on October 7th. And the security needs are great of the entire state of Israel. And of course, Judea and Samaria, God forbid something should happen again. And the way to prevent that is to fund the communities of Judea and Samaria, which are overlooking Tel Aviv and are overlooking Ben Gurion Airport, where 75% of the population lives, from Gadara to Hadera. So it's extremely important. I agree 100% with Minister Smotrich that we need funding in Judea and Samaria. You know, you can go up to places like Alfem and Asher and see the planes landing at Ben Gurion Airport, and then you realize how important it is that those communities have security. We are overlooking and protecting Tel Aviv from up above, and that's why it is essential that our communities are protected. So as far as that goes, I 100% agree with Minister Smotrich that our communities certainly need that funding for the well-being and the welfare of the entire state of Israel.
No, but it's not just for security. It's for much more than that. Security is there. We got the army there. We can argue about whether the settlements are given security or we have to pay for the security, and they are just taking the needs of the Israeli army, like we saw on October 7th. But let's be honest, we are not talking about now security budgets. We are talking about civilian issues. We are talking about religious issues. We are talking about political money that is getting into political ministries. It's not about saving the life of the settlers, or not even the saving of the life of people in Tel Aviv. And you need to look at the picture, and you need to look what's going on in the south next to Gaza. These communities are devastated. The kibbutzim are totally destroyed. They need the support. They need the assistance, not the settlers that every year they are getting more than the average Israeli. And now, even during the war, when we have people in need, the settlers are not saying saying, okay, we are ready to get only what we deserve. We want to get more, and this is what we are seeing. And I think that the public is looking, and the settler leadership, including Smotrich, will pay the price. According to the polls, he's not going. He's not overcome the threshold, and he has 0 mandate according to the latest poll. Not by mistake, I think.
I would just say to that nobody in Judea and Samaria that I know of is overlooking the needs of those in the north. And of course, we're not overlooking the needs of those in the south who lost so much, who lost everything. But as I said before, at the same time, we have to remember that we cannot let another October 7th happen. And the best way to do that is to ensure that the coastal plain is protected. And the way to do that is to protect from above, to protect the communities of Judea and Samaria, both with the military army presence and with the civilian presence. Look what happened. We left Gaza, pulled every last citizen and every last soldier out in 2005, and look where we are today. Look what happened at the border, on the border communities. So
look what happened that we didn't solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Look what happened when you are in charge. Your government, your leaders, you are the only one. It's a full right-wing government. This is not in your shift. This is in your decades, because it's not my policy that was failing. It's your policy. My policy is not being even tried. We are trying your policy not to solve the conflict, to ignore the Palestinians, to think that we can lock Gaza, to put it under siege for more than a decade, and to believe that things will be better. This is the conception that totally collapsed, and we need to look about other solution, to speak with the PA, to speak with the Palestinian moderate side, with the moderate Arab countries, with the United States, and eventually to change the policy and to have an agreement with them not to continue the conflict like you are suggesting.
I don't see the moderates that you speak of when over 75% of the PA Arabs said that they supported what happened on October 7th. They support Hamas and they support the terrorism. So I don't see any moderates here. We've tried that before. Remember the Oslo process way back in the 90s. We tried negotiating with the PA, see where that led to. That led to the pullout from Gaza. That led to the situation we are today. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I don't think we should go down that path once again.
I doubt that we will be able to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at the moment. So let's try perhaps to solve some political questions, gentlemen. And this is perhaps a mix of what we've been discussing here. There are now calls for religious Zionist youth groups to help revive the Gaza border communities alongside those kibbutzim who were hard hit, of course, during the massacre. Josh Hasten, what do you make of it?
Well, I would say now, unfortunately, as a result of October 7th, I mean, there is some good that came out of it, unfortunately, as a result of that, but we are united now more than ever. So whether you're talking about religious youth groups or secular youth groups, we're seeing the people of Israel come together like never before, and perhaps like never before in the history of the Jewish people. So I don't think it matters whether somebody's wearing a kippah or is not wearing a kippah. If somebody wants to go down and help the residents of the South, whether they're religious, secular,
no, for sure. I was alluding to something more organized. That is, of
course. Let's be honest. It's a very cynical initiative that is trying to take advantage of this terrible situation and actually to take over these communities. We need to speak about values, and the values of these communities, that the kibbutz movement and the people that are more supporting of the idea of human rights and even peace, it's contradict to the religious values that are being inflected by the national Zionists. Therefore, to take advantage of their misery and to try to take over their communities and to establish a new community with a totally different values, this is unfair understatement. It's even worse than unfair, and I hope that the right wing will understand that it's not done.
That's absolutely ridiculous. That's like saying the Chabad guys shouldn't go to Tel Aviv and offer people to put on tefillin. This is not an issue of trying to take advantage or steal people's minds. These are holy individuals who are in the midst of a war, actually putting themselves in harm's way, willing to go down to the south under rocket fire and show solidarity with their brothers.
This is fine. If they are coming for 1 day to help, it's okay. But if they want to rebuild the community and to create it a different one,
no, we're not talking about a volunteering program. And gentlemen, unfortunately, we don't
Nobody's proselytizing here. Nobody's proselytizing. People want to help in so many different ways. We've seen it helping soldiers, helping residents. We've seen it all over the country like never before.
Of course, the volunteering spirit is across the board, crossing sectors. This is for certain, no doubt about that. The discussion was surrounding something more organized or government-led even. And gentlemen,
no ulterior motive. No ulterior motive here. That's all I'll say.
No, fair enough. Just wanted to clarify it on my end.
Sure.
And gentlemen, we don't have much time, but the bottom line seems to be clear. This sense of unity that swept across the country might not be translated into the same sense of unity politically speaking. Josh.
Yeah, maybe not politically speaking, but again, I just reached out to Yariv and I sincerely said he should run for government. And that's out of sincerity, even though I disagree with him. I think the unity goes above and beyond politics. Of course, there are going to be disagreements with the budget. It's still a country. You still have different ideologies, different positions, left, right, center. That's why you have so many parties in this country. People have different opinions. But right now, as you started off by saying, we do have to pass the state budget, but we should put those differences aside and we should focus on brotherhood. And Yariv is my brother, even though I disagree with, again, 90+% of everything he's saying. But this is where we are right now. Let's show the light to the rest of the world.
But I think
let's unite, folks.
After such a catastrophe, it's very clear for any Israeli that we need to go for an election after the war. And if the Prime Minister will say out loud, I understand that we need to regain the trust from the public, and we will go for an early election, you will see the unity continue. But this Prime Minister is saying, no, I'm going to continue to be the Prime Minister, and how I'm going to do it, although I know that the majority of Israelis doesn't want it to happen, I'm going to give my partners money from the budget and to buy their support. This is not uniting Israeli society.
Josh Hasten, Yariv Oppenheimer, in the spirit of